This man named Josef Fritzl, he went psycho and he ended up I wouldn't say falling in love with his daughter, but became obsessed with her to the point where he kidnapped her and put her in this cellar that he had under his home and created a new life with her, aka had 7 kids with his daughter. So this is a story of Josef Fritzl and his daughter Elisabeth Fritzl and how she literally lived her whole entire life in a cellar and had 7 kids with her father and never saw the sunlight until one day she had the ability to escape and was freed for life. So let's get into it. Viewer and listener discretion is advised. This episode contains discussion of sensitive topics that may be distressing for some audiences. Please take care while listening, and if these topics are triggering for you, we encourage you to prioritize your well-being. Welcome to Taste the Tea podcast. My name is Teresa, and if you're new here, this podcast is about true crime. So if you're interested in true crime, please subscribe, comment, like, and if you want to watch more of true crime, please watch my previous episodes. Okay, now let's get into this one. So, this one was really weird when I was getting into it because I'm very close to my father. My father, he is my best friend. So to think that her and Elisabeth, in her perspective, seeing her father in a way that was just very traumatic and not normal is very hard to understand. But I wanted to get into who was Josef Fritzl. Like, who was he? Where did he come from? Why did he do this? So he was born on April 9th of 1935. He was born in Amsterdam, Lower Austria. So he was the only child in his whole family. Sorry, before this, one of the lights fell on my head. And so I think I have a headache. I don't know. It kind of hurts right here. But anyways, let's continue. So he was the only child of his whole family. That kind of already screams crazy. Not really. I'm sorry. But it's just most of the time that I've heard, at least psychologically speaking, only childs are usually very antisocial, not able to communicate. They turn out, not all the time, okay? So if you're only child, I know a few people that are only childs and they're perfectly fine. But in some cases that we've heard of, like serial killers or other stuff, other people that have gone crazy, sometimes they're only childs and psychologically it states or people, okay, psychologically there is like this whole like antisocial thing because they didn't grow up with siblings and all this stuff. So yeah, so he was the only child. And he states that his mother would emotionally and physically abuse him. Off the bat, he already didn't grow up with a very happy life. He grew up with a traumatic life. So when Joseph was 4 years old, his father had left the family and he was just very like a severe alcoholic. He just left one day. He got up and was like, bye. And Joseph never got in contact with him ever again. So I know a little bit about Joseph's dad. He did end up in the military in World War II around that time, and then I don't know what happened to him. So there's just this whole backstory of his dad, and I just don't know what is true and what is not true. So I'm not going to talk about him, but just know that he was a severe alcoholic and he left. So, he didn't see a very good example. Joseph did not see a really good example as he grew up or at a very young age. So during World War II, his mother was arrested and was sent to a concentration camp. So this was during like the Hitler times and all this stuff. She was sent to the concentration camp for a few months, and this is when Joseph was only 9 years old. So Joseph was traumatized, and he was sent to an orphanage, and he was told that his mother had died. But as soon as the war ended, that's when Joseph found out that his mother was actually still alive. So he ended up back with his mother, and the trauma and the abuse became even worse. So his mother just like was very not happy with the world, like with the world and war. But she wasn't very happy. She didn't agree with any of it. And she was not happy with Hitler, what was Hitler doing and all this stuff. So she was just very, very, a very mad person, okay? So she took it out on Joseph, and Joseph started, at this point, he's 9 years old, but as soon as he turned 15 years old, he started sticking up for himself. So he was like, no, mom, I'm not listening to you. I'm not going to do what you say. So at the age of 16, he ended up escaping or leaving his home. And this was around 1951. So he moved to a city called Linz, and he became an engineer. So over time, he became an engineer. He went to school and everything. And by 1956, he ended up marrying 17-year-old Rose Marie, and he was 21. So he was a little bit older than her, but they ended up marrying around that time. And by 1963, they had 2 daughters and 1 son. Now, this is when he started becoming pretty violent, and I'm assuming it was because in his career, he started basically becoming a bit wealthy. And I guess it was getting to his head and all this other stuff that was going on with the world and all this stuff. So he became very violent and domineering towards his wife and his kids. By April 8th of 1966, this is when Elisabeth was born. This is when the predatory habits ended up picking up again. And the reason why I say again is because before, in his times when he was still with his mother, he was in a situation where his father had left at a very young age. His mother was very abusive to him physically and emotionally. And so he was going through a lot mentally. He was the only child, so I don't know if he had any friends. I don't know if he was able to communicate, but he didn't have any siblings to grow up with. So he started experiencing these little moments where he would kind of listen out for couples, young couples. Like he would sneak out, go to their houses or whatever, find them in areas in the parking lots or in their car or whatever, and try to listen out for them having sex. And so he would do this a lot, and he would pick up this little habit throughout his young years. And this was during the time where he was starting to stand up for himself towards his mom. So these habits start picking up, these predatory habits start picking up later on when he's already married and has kids. There was an incident in early 1967. So he ended up breaking into this young woman's home. She was a mother, and he ends up raping her while holding a knife to her neck and while her baby is sleeping next to the bed as well. That is crazy. I don't know how he has the ability to do that, or how, I mean, obviously he's not normal, or he wasn't normal. So it's just really weird, like, to go and break into someone's home and rape them while their baby is sleeping right next to them and then holding a knife. It just sounds crazy to me. It's insane. But so he ended up doing this in 1967. He was arrested, and he only served 12 months of an 18-month service. Okay, so what? Like, for rape and holding a knife to her neck. And he only serves 12 months. Whatever. Different times. Another fact to this, sentencing, or this, how they, in Austria, how they kind of control the, whatever it is, criminals over there in Austria. back in the days, after 15 years of any offender's record, it is wiped out. It's wiped clean. Say like Joseph. Joseph committed this criminal act, right? He ended up breaking into this young mother's home and raped her and held a knife to her neck, right? And he was served or sentenced 18 months. Now, this is in his record, but after 15 years, it's no longer there. So it's like if it never happened, right? And his wife, at that time, when he was sentenced for those 18 months, because he was still married, she stood by him. She was like, she forgave him for what he did, and she stood by him, and she never said anything after that. Like, it never came up. So it's like insane because, you know, it makes sense because of what he did. We'll move on. So the family ended up growing pretty fast. So like I said in the beginning, he only had 3 daughters and 1 son at that time. But now by the end of 1970, Joseph and his wife had 4 daughters and 3 boys now. And so a total of 7 kids. And his engineer career and like basically grew, skyrocketed. Like he was just very wealthy at that time. So by 1973, he was known as a wealthy member of the community. And he ended up purchasing a guest house next to Monsey Lake, which was a 3-story hotel with 40 bedrooms. And he owned many more guest houses and restaurants. So he was becoming pretty rich at that time, right? And so by 1978, he ended up wanting to expand the family home. Now this was, I'm assuming, or I don't know, because I feel like he kind of already maybe had this plan in his head, or maybe not. I'm not sure. But basically, the reason why I say that is because he wanted to expand his family home. So he had gotten the permission to build a large cellar underneath his home. So why would he want that? I mean, it's not like maybe it was his, liking, whatever. He just felt like he wanted to have a cellar for whatever reason. But this cellar ended up becoming the place where Elisabeth literally stayed in for most of her life. But anyways, so at that time he ended up planning to build this cellar, and he had to get permission too. It's like, how did he, whatever. Elisabeth now in 1978 is 12 years old. So this is when his obsession with her started. He started seeing her as he started seeing himself in her, and he felt like they could relate. He felt like it was just something odd. It was a relationship that he just picked up, and he ended up spying on her, demanding to know where she was at all times, like just very jealous, very overprotective, just becoming very odd. At 12 years old, when Elisabeth was 12 years old, this is also when the abuse started. So he started exposing himself to Elisabeth. And the way he would expose himself is basically he would just randomly show up naked or whatever. And then he would also leave pornographic magazines under her pillow. And then he would begin to sexually abuse her. And this is when she was only 12 years old. So it's just, she was really young. Okay, whatever. She obviously had friends, right? And her friends, from what I know, they did not know what was going on at the time. They knew how Elisabeth's father was, Joseph. And there was like this rule of whatever happens at the home stays at the home. So you can't really speak about anything that happens at your home. And so Elisabeth kind of went by that. And she was just very afraid of her father and how he was, because he would just make it seem like he would just seems very, very scary. And if you see pictures of him, he's just a very creepy man. He looks really, He looks creepy in general, so I would be afraid. So this is also the time when the expansion at the family home started changing up. So he had now built rooms beneath the cellar. So he would start planning to, I guess, make rooms down there for whatever reason, because at this time he hasn't thought about, like, I guess, kidnapping her yet. But for him to now want to start making rooms beneath the cellar is odd to me. I feel like he already had this in mind. Like he already wanted to, or he already had the plans to, like, kidnap Elisabeth and do everything that he wanted to do, right? Anyways, on January 28th of 1983, Elisabeth ends up running away. I'm assuming she just got tired, because obviously, like we know, she was getting abused by her father. And so she wanted to escape from all of this trauma, escape from all the things that she's going through, because she's literally getting abused by her father physically and mentally, emotionally, in any type of way. She's getting abused by her father. And at that age, you do not, like, it's just not something that you want to go through. So she ends up escaping. But the problem is, she is still a minor at this time. So a warrant was sent out. They ended up finding Elisabeth, and Joseph ends up picking up Elisabeth and taking her home. While they were in the car ride, allegedly, he had stated that he would no longer, or he promised to her that he would no longer abuse her, and he would no longer, do the things that he was doing to her. And so obviously that was just a way to kind of convince her to stay, but obviously that did not happen. He lied, and it continued on. So in 1983, the cellar was now fully finished, and it was literally, there was a bunch of rooms beneath the cellar, and they were interconnecting, and there was some storage area and another place for workshops. This cellar, when you look at it, it just seems so small. And to think that this is where Elisabeth's life was taking place, or where she was living, it's insane. Because if you look at it, it just looks very, like, claustrophobic, for me at least. So it just didn't seem like a place to live in. But yes, so he ends up finishing the cellar. And in 1984, Elisabeth told Joseph that she was going to move with her sister. Now, Joseph was like, no, you are not moving. You're staying with me. And so obviously, Elisabeth did not, like this idea. Elisabeth at this time was 18 years old, so she can do whatever she wants. She can leave. Joseph was like, okay, so if she leaves, she could tell somebody what's been happening here at the house, or I would never see her again, like all this stuff, right? So a lot of things came to his head. So he had this plan. He ends up convincing Elisabeth that he needed to have a conversation with her in private. So what he does is he tries to talk to her in private. So as soon as she turns her back to him, that's when obviously he probably already had this, ready to go. That's when he used a chloroformed infused rag to cover her face, and it obviously knocks her out. And then he ends up cuffing her hands and carrying her downstairs to the cellar. Now, when Elisabeth wakes up, she obviously notices that she's in the cellar. So she's like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? And he forces her to write a letter stating that she had ran away and joined a cult. She writes the letter, and he ends up driving 100 miles out of town to post the letter. Now, in 1985, the police had asked a journalist to put her on the paper because she is now considered missing. So, the police thought it was very fishy. The police thought that she has been kidnapped, and they can't prove why, or they can't prove like what happened, or they can't really say what happened, but they just think it's really fishy, and they don't believe the whole cult situation, the whole cult story. So they tell this journalist to put her on the newspaper to see if anybody could or would see her or would find her. But yeah, so this is the very first time when her face was blasted all over the world. For him to make up this story, knowing that he has her in the cellar, is I don't know how he can just keep a straight face, and just like, that's just psychotic. That's very psychotic and just crazy to me. I don't know. I can't wrap that around my head. It's insane for him to like make up this whole story, go on, in the public eye, and say all this stuff and make up all this stuff. And then in the back of his head, he knows that he has her in the cell or in the cellar. So it's like, yeah, it's crazy. She stays in the cellar for many, many years. During the time that Elisabeth was in the cellar, Josef would rape her, abuse her, torture her the whole time she was living under there. And Elisabeth ends up pregnant with her first baby. Now, the first child that she ended up pregnant with, she miscarried. But the first child that she ended up giving birth to was in 1988. It was a baby girl. Her name was Kirsten. And Josef ends up giving Elisabeth a book, a childbirth book, a towel, scissors, and a couple of napkins. And she gives birth all by herself. That's all he gave her so that she could give birth. What? Like, she gave birth in the cellar alone with just those objects, with just those items. That girl is strong. She is, yeah, I don't know. I don't have any words. But in 1990, her second child was born, and this child was named Stefan. In 1991, she was in there for now almost 7 years and is now pregnant with her third baby. So now she has 3 babies in total. And this whole entire time, she's giving birth down in the cellar. She's living in there for now 7 years. And her siblings and mom are upstairs living a whole different life. And she knows that. And it's crazy. And they don't know, her family don't know that she is living downstairs. They all think that she's gone. They all think that she ran away. They think that she's in a cult. But little do they know, she's literally in the cellar, downstairs, in the same house. In 1992, her third child was born with a defect, so a heart defect. And this child was named Lisa. So Josef was afraid that the so-called soundproof cellar would hold up the crying of the baby in pain. So Elisabeth tells Josef, we need to do something because I don't want my baby to die. So what he does, and his plan was stupid, but what he does is he takes the baby, puts the baby, I guess, in a little basket or whatever, and he leaves the baby Lisa, on the doorstep of his own house. Anyways, he leaves the baby in the doorstep of his own house, acts like nothing, goes back inside, and they open the door. Oh, there's a baby. And then there's a note left with the baby. And this note was obviously written by Elisabeth forcefully, by Josef. It's basically, the letter states that she can no longer take care of this baby, and if they could take care of her. So the parents end up taking the baby Lisa, and they end up taking her to the hospital because they obviously know that something is wrong with her off the bat. She ends up having an emergency surgery to correct her heart defect and lived her life with her grandparents, with her grandma, and also her dad and grandpa. That's so weird. But yes, so Lisa ends up growing up with her grandparents, not knowing that her mom is down in the cellar. In the cellar, they started feeling very cramped. So Elisabeth is living with her 2 kids. So she still has her other 2 kids, because at that time she only has 3. So she's still living with her 2 kids downstairs, and then obviously from time to time, Joseph will go downstairs. So they're starting to feel very cramped because the kids are starting to grow up. They're starting to run around and all this stuff. So what Joseph does is he tries to make this space a little bit more livable. So he adds a TV, he adds a refrigerator, he adds little toys and stuff like that for the kids. But the thing is that he is the only one in charge of deciding what will be in the cellar or what he will add into the cellar. So yeah, so that's how I guess he was trying to make Elisabeth's life better, but obviously that's inevitable if you're living in a cellar being abused by your father, you know. But anyways, and then by December 16th, 1994, there is a second child that appears on the doorstep of the house or the home of the Fritzls. And there's another note from Elisabeth. And it states that this is baby Monica. And now baby Monica is now adopted by her grandparents. So now Elisabeth has given birth to her 4th child. This was all put in the newspaper. So now there's 2 kids that show up on the doorstep of the Fritzls' home, and Elisabeth is nowhere to be found. So a lot of people started thinking, okay, this Elisabeth girl, she a bad mom, because how are you gonna abandon your kids, 2 kids? At least they think that she only has 2 kids. But how are you gonna abandon your 2 kids and send them to your grandparents? Because you want to be in this cult. That's what everyone believes, right? So yeah, so the whole world was starting to think that Elisabeth was a horrible mother, that she was a horrible human being for doing this to her kids, and she is nowhere to be found. So on April 28th, 1996, she now gives birth to twins, Michael and Alexander. Now, Elisabeth and Joseph have a total of 6 kids together. And Michael, the twins, one of the twins, Michael, ends up very, very, very sick. And he starts having breathing difficulties. So Joseph decides, well, I'm going to let this little boy die. And so he lets the baby die. And he burns his body in the furnace of the house to dispose of the body. The fact that the mom or like his wife do not know what's going on is crazy to me. But now he basically murders a baby. And so now, now that Michael ends up dying, one of the twins, Joseph doesn't want to risk Alexander dying. So a third baby arrives on the doorstep of the Fritzls' family home. So now there's a third baby, and they adopt this third baby. The grandparents, Joseph and his wife, adopt this third baby of Elisabeth. Which is crazy to me how nobody saw Joseph going up to his own doorstep and leaving a baby, and then out of nowhere going back inside and be like, oh my God, a baby. I wonder how this got here. I don't understand. Like, it's just so weird because, I mean, obviously the area that they were living in is very quiet, but also the street is very busy with a lot of cars moving and all this stuff. So it's like, I don't know how nobody saw Joseph going up to his own front doorstep and leaving a baby. At this time, Elisabeth was obviously too scared to escape. Joseph ends up kind of engraving this fear in her, basically saying that there are electric doors, gas traps, and there's no way that anybody could hear her crying. So Elisabeth was like, well, let me not even try to escape. So this fear was engraved in her, and not once did she try to escape. By December 2002, Elisabeth has now been incarcerated for about 18 years. And now her child Kirsten is 14 years old and her child Stefan is 12. So they're still living in this cellar, and not once has Kirsten or Stefan seen the sun, gone outside, know anything else but the cellar. And now she gives birth to her last baby. And this baby was called Felix. Joseph wanted Felix, for whatever reason, to inherit his world, to inherit his everything he had, I guess. And so he wanted him to go to school, to learn, to become a great human being. Felix, right? But he obviously realized that he could not do that. And then he also realized that he can't add a fourth baby on the doorstep, because obviously it would just throw red flags, which I don't know how they the other times did not throw red flags, but whatever. He just thought that wouldn't be a good idea. And so he started planning to free Elisabeth at the end of 2008. 2008. In 2008, like, that's already like 24 years. If 18 years, 2008. Yeah, that's already 24 years that she's been incarcerated in this cellar with her 2 kids. So in the middle of March 2008, Kirsten is now 19 years old, and she becomes very, very ill. And Elisabeth convinces Joseph to take her to the hospital because she doesn't want her baby to die. And it's like, at this point, if you allow Kirsten to die, you're a murderer. You're already a murderer for the other one. So he does. So Joseph ends up taking Kirsten to the doctor. And obviously the doctor is like, okay, we need more information. We need to talk to the mother and all this stuff. So this is put out all over the news because they obviously find out that Kirsten is Elisabeth's daughter. And Elisabeth sees this on her television that she has downstairs in the cellar. And Joseph comes back, and Elisabeth convinces Joseph that she needs to go over there because she needs to save her baby. She doesn't want her baby to die. For whatever reason, Joseph agrees, which thankfully, but he agrees, and he allows Elisabeth to go to the doctor or to the hospital. And they do the interview with her, and they ask her a few questions about Kirsten and all this stuff. And then right after the interview, they ended up arresting her. So they arrest her and they start interrogating her with all a bunch of questions like, where have you been? Like, what's been going on? And after a few hours of this interrogation, only when they threaten to take away her children from her, she reveals what Joseph has been doing to her all these years and where she has been for 24 years. And they end up arresting Joseph. And they free Stefan and Felix from the cellar. And when they free them, they realize how bad of a condition they are in, because downstairs in the cellar, it's very humid. There are a bunch of insects. There is mold. It's just not a very nice, livable place. So they were really bad condition. They're very pale because obviously they didn't receive any vitamin D from the sun, because they never seen the sun. And so it was just a lot. They had a lot of infections within them, and they were taken care of right after they were released. But yeah, Joseph ends up getting arrested. That's how he gets caught, which is crazy because it's only like the fact that he like was convinced by Elisabeth to allow her to leave and be exposed to the public, knowing that he's probably gonna get caught, is crazy to me. Maybe he just didn't think that he would get caught or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, and then the kids are super excited. So like Felix and Stefan, they're super excited to see the sun. Like, it's crazy, like to see the sun. They're super excited to see the outside, to see the plants, to see everything, the grass. It's like a moment of excitement for them. And it was a whole different world that they have never seen their whole entire lives. So after their escape, after Joseph's arrest, they end up starting the trial. So Joseph was charged with rape, enslavement, incest, and murder of one child conceived with Elisabeth. At first, during the trial, he pled not guilty, but he quickly changed his plea when he saw Elisabeth and heard her talk about her trauma and talk about how none of this was a relationship to her or felt, I guess, normal to her. She said that this was something that was very traumatic and just something she saw it as a crime. And Joseph bursted out in tears. I guess, hearing her say that and admitting that she was not happy in the cellar with him and with all the abuse that was going on, because I guess, I don't know if he thought that she would fall in love with him or what. I'm not sure. But he burst out in tears and he changed his plea, and he changed it to guilty. So on March 2009, after a 4-day trial, he was found guilty and was sentenced life in prison for murder by neglect, 20 years for enslavement, 15 years for rape, 10 years for deprivation of liberty, 5 years for coercion, sorry if I mispronounced that, and then 1 year for incest. Elisabeth and her kids are now living a normal life, but they're living a very private one, away from the media. She did not want her kids to be exposed to the public eye or want the media to interview them or anything. So her location is undisclosed, and she wants her kids to live a normal life. So she basically erased her name from the world, and nobody knows her kids, who her kids are, how they look like. And yeah, that's the life of Elisabeth. She lived a very crazy life. It was just a lot to comprehend, to understand, or to even just comprehend that her father would do such a thing. He would just incarcerate her for many, many years and never let her see the light, and never let her kids see the light, at least a few of them. It's just crazy. It's just crazy that a father can do such a thing. I don't know. I just could not imagine, that life, the life that Elisabeth lived with her kids, and knowing that, her kids are her father's kids too. And it's just a lot. It's a lot. It's very traumatic. And I hope that she was able to, get through it and live her life normally. And I hope her kids do the same. But yeah, that's the story of Josef Fritzl and Elisabeth Fritzl. And if you guys want me to talk about any other stories, anything similar to this, or if you've gone through anything similar to this, hopefully not, but if you know of anyone that has gone through anything like this, please don't hesitate to ask for help or to seek help, because this is very traumatic. It's a very traumatic situation. It's a life that nobody should live. And yeah, but I hope you guys enjoyed this story. And if you want to hear more of these stories, please subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for the next one. Okay, bye.